Hey, so Spider-Woman is my favorite superhero. She's a Marvel Comics character that has nothing to do with Spider-Man. That's not what this video is about. I did a different video on how she's not connected to Spider-Man a long time ago. But Marvel has been up to some shit with this character recently, and I kind of want to talk about it. So the whole impetus behind this is that on November 19th, 2019, a new Spider-Woman ongoing series was announced. And this immediately concerned me for a few reasons, but mainly I was excited because Spider-Woman is getting a new book again. Spider-Woman is a very obscure character, like not many people care about her. She's not super important to the grand scheme of the Marvel Universe. She had her day in the spotlight in like 2008 with Secret Invasion, and that really even wasn't her. Her time came very shortly and passed. She got her like 15 minutes of fame in the Marvel Universe, and she's just been kind of a background character for a while. So it is an event whenever Spider-Woman gets a solo book, and is not just part of a team. So this immediately struck me with like, oh, hey, Spider-Woman is getting a new book. That's cool. The main reason I was skeptical back then was because the pitch from the writer, Carlo Pacheco, who we'll talk about a lot in this video, talked a lot about explosions for some reason, helicopter explosions, namely. And that's not Spider-Woman, but hey, it was early days, and, you know, it's like a one paragraph pitch about a book that's coming out in like 6 months. So I was mostly excited to see a new Spider-Woman book get announced. I also had never heard of Pacheco before, but I didn't immediately like clock that as a bad thing. Most of the time when a new book comes out, I am not privy to the creative team's work, especially when it's a small character like this. For example, when Vision got his Tom King treatment, I had no idea who Tom King was. I vaguely knew about Grayson, which was like the book before that out of the big two that people really knew from Tom King, but I hadn't read it. I heard it was pretty good, but I just read Vision because it was a new book and I wanted to give it a try, and that's how Tom King got on my radar. So, you know, I'm not going to completely dispel a book because I have no idea who the creatives behind it are. That's stupid. If the pitch is interesting or I'm interested in the character, I'll give it a shot before I dismiss it. So anyway, for about a month after that, the book was just announced, like it was a thing we were getting and no other news came out about it until December 16th, a month later, where Marvel announced that there were going to be like a handful of Spider-Woman themed variant covers for a bunch of upcoming comics in the new year. And this was the first time where I like put my detective hat on and was like, okay, what the fuck is going on? Why is Spider-Woman getting a book, and why is she being pushed like this? To give a character like Spider-Woman, who is obscure and relatively unimportant in the grand scheme of things, a book and push her like this with variant covers that are themed specifically to her, that means they have plans. Like, they're doing something with this character, whether that be in the comics, whether that be, you know, she's getting a new TV show, whether that be she's getting a movie. I had no clue what these plans were. I talked about this on Twitter, and no one else really knew, except for the obvious thing that they were, like I mentioned, leading up to her getting a movie. And eventually, that revealed to be the case. Well, allegedly, or whatever. On February 11th, some news stories broke that Sony was developing a Spider-Woman movie. And this is kind of something that everyone has, you know, if you just look at the characters that Sony has the film rights for, obviously eventually they're going to get around to Spider-Woman, especially if they're scraping like the Morbius barrel at this point. They're clearly going to get around to Spider-Woman at some point. So it was inevitable. And it is still like early days for this as well. It's early days for most of this stuff because the book isn't even out yet. But it's concerning to me that Spider-Woman is getting this push because of a movie. And you might be confused as to why someone whose favorite superhero getting a movie is like a bad thing, but mostly that's just because I am paranoid that they're gonna fuck it up, like they're gonna ruin Spider-Woman's character. And frankly, as a character who is more often than not misunderstood by people who don't read her books or even read comics as in general and just haven't read anything with Spider-Woman, 90% of people assume that she is, you know, like Spider-Man's sister or Spider-Man's girlfriend or something, or connected to Spider-Man in some way, which she's just not in literally any way aside from working with him occasionally. And that's usually by happenstance. It concerns me as a character who is so obscure, movie execs coming into it and saying, hey, we're gonna make a movie about Spider-Woman. they're not going to. They're not going to make a movie about Jessica Drew or Julia Carpenter or anything like that. I would very highly doubt they'll make one about Julia Carpenter or Maddie Franklin or anything. Actually, Maddie Franklin I could see, because she does have ties to Spider-Man. Anyway, they're not going to give the Spider-Woman that I know on the big screen. And because of that, people's minds are going to be changed. Like, general audiences are going to go see this movie and they'll be like, oh, that's Spider-Woman. And then I'll have to tell people time and time again that no, it's not. But eventually, because if the movie's successful, she will become that in the comics, and then I will lose the character that I've grown to love. So, you know, you start to see why I'm worried about a character that that I have such a love for being adapted in a way, especially by a company that doesn't have a good track record with this, would just cause a lot of confusion and could potentially ruin the character, even in the source material. So that is why I was concerned, especially when the movie announcement happened. It's really never a great thing to force a book into existence because of a tentpole event. Sometimes this works out well, but in other cases it doesn't. Like Civil War II, an awful event comic book, happened because of the Civil War movie. That was editors being like, we need to make a Civil War themed event, not, hey, I have an idea for an event, and also it happens to tie into Civil War. But hey, at least if this movie comes out and the Spider-Woman book is successful, I'll get to see more of my favorite character, a character who is obscure and is usually placed on a shelf when she doesn't have a solo book or isn't part of a team, and we just don't see her. And the biggest thing that they've done with the character already, even before the book came out, like a new thing that they're doing, that they're trying with Spider-Woman because of the alleged movie and this new book and everything, is a costume change. The main word that I'd use to describe this new costume change is uninspired. And that bugs me, because her last costume change had so much going for it. Spider-Woman is a character who has basically been in the same set of tights since her appearance. The only difference between her first appearance and like 2014, like pretty much the only difference was that her cowl changed. You can see her hair now. But other than that, she was in the same shit forever. And a lot of that was because she was an obscure character that didn't like get new ongoings and have these unnecessary costume changes thrust upon her. That creates like an iconic look that, especially after her big costume change in 2014, I think it was 2014, in the Dennis Hopeless Javier Rodriguez run, that came with a massive story change as well, something to inform the costume change as opposed to just, hey, new number one, so she gets a new costume for no reason. And to be fair, the book isn't out yet, so we don't know the story reason why she changed her costume, if there even is one, which I would put money on there not being one, but there was one for the previous costume, which is why I'm so concerned about this one, especially because this one just doesn't look very good. For those that don't know, the reason why she changed from this costume to this costume was because she was fed up with multiversal cosmic comic book bullshit and decided to quit the Avengers and move on and go back to being a PI and just have a more grounded life again. So she had a more grounded costume to match that. It was a mirroring thing going on. Both like physically and mentally putting her old life behind her, even though she was revisiting being a PI. But her life for a long time, the status quo was that she was on a big superhero team and she was part of all these crazy shenanigans. And she was just like, I'm tired. I'm tired of all this garbage. So I'm gonna stop. The point being that that was a very story motivated change. But again, we don't know the story reason for why she's in this new costume, so it's worth mentioning though. So let's focus on like actually what this new costume looks like. Let's analyze it a little bit. Overall, this costume just reeks of change for the sake of change. Like Iron Man goes through this all the time, where he just gets a new armor for no reason. But usually there's like a cool gimmick to go along with it, which that's fun. And most of the time it is motivated by story, like with Superior Iron Man, one of the better Iron Man costume changes, that was motivated by story. The like 3 design facets of this costume that aren't just carried over from the previous one, which really the only thing carried over from the previous one is that she's in a full bodysuit and she has a cowl on, are this big spider emblem on her chest, which a big spider emblem is something that, it's iconography that has never been associated with Spider-Woman. As part of her costume. That's a Spider-Man thing. There was sort of a big spider on her previous costume, the the Rodriguez Hopeless costume, and it incorporated the original triangle spider body thing that was on her original suit, you know, the arrow pointing down to her crotch. It was basically shrunk and had a spider put around it, so it made more sense there. This is just straight up like a Spider-Man, like it looks like the Superior Spider-Man spider emblem. Her original logo, like her actual emblem, the yellow triangle, it's there. It's there like 6 times, but it's there. It's on her hands, it's on her back, it's on her chest, it's on her forehead, and it's on her the back of her knees. I don't know why it's there so many times. The only place it's there usually is on her forehead, on her cowl, and on her chest. And then the last thing, which is the most infuriating thing, the last design thing here, is the red part of her suit has webbing on it. Now, I don't blame you for assuming that Spider-Woman would use webbing, but she doesn't. She straight doesn't. Like, she's never used webbing except for in this one oopsie panel of Secret Empire where she was drawn swinging on a web. But that was a mistake, clearly, because she flies. She doesn't use webbing. She never has. The spider part of her spider powers, aside from just, you know, generic, like, proportional strength, like super strong, fast type stuff, is Venom Blasts. She takes the venom part of a spider, the poison part, and she shoots little energy blasts at people. The only part of her design that has ever had webbing is when she sometimes has like armpit webs. But she's not Spider-Man. Webbing as part of a suit has been iconography that Spider-Man characters have used forever. Spider-Woman hasn't had that. That might not be a big deal to some of you who aren't as familiar with the Spider-Woman character, which is fine. Like, it makes sense that a character with spider in their name would have webs, like, in their design. Like, it makes sense as a spider thing. But the problem to me there is that, yes, from an outsider's perspective, that makes sense. But you shouldn't have someone who is unfamiliar with the character redesign said character. And that's what this says to me, is that this design was done by someone who isn't familiar with Spider-Woman, and it's a nice design on its own. It's kind of boring because it's mostly black, but they heard Spider-Woman, looked at a few images, and were like, all right, yeah, I got an idea. And then they drew it up, and we're like, okay, cool, looks great. And I am generally used to people who don't read comics or aren't as familiar with Spider-Woman as a character, like thinking that she is a Spider-Man character, she's part of the Spider-Man mythos, and not knowing that she is more or less an Avengers character, or just, you know, her own thing. But Marvel historically gets this right. They're usually pretty good about it. They're in the camp that, yeah, Spider-Woman is her own thing. She's an Avengers character. She's not a Spider-Man character. Except that one time in Secret Empire, I guess. And her entire presence in Spider Island, and her entire presence in Spider-Verse, and when they moved her over to the Spider-Man office from the event. Okay, I guess Marvel also just doesn't understand her. If you think about it, this costume is indicative of a larger problem with this whole new direction for Spider-Woman. Honestly, after this costume design, I was miffed about it, but, you know, every superhero goes through a bad costume, and it'll get reverted eventually. Some people will hate it, some people will love it, whatever. They all go through it. It's part of being like a superhero comic book character who gets a new book. It's just a thing that happens. So I was still skeptical, more skeptical than I was initially, but I wasn't hating it yet. Like, I was still excited. I was still like, okay, Spider-Woman's still getting a new book. Who am I to complain? Beggars can't be choosers. That was until they released a trailer for the book. We're gonna watch that now. We're gonna take a look. Now I'm gonna say some things.
Spider-Woman is not in a really good place right now. She's kind of having troubles.
So they open this trailer with Pacheco and Nick Lowe, who is one of the editors on the book, talking about the plot in some vague terms. I have some nitpicks about the pitch of this book, like I've mentioned, and what they already said, but I will hold off on saying some of those because a lot of them just come down to things that happened off panel, I assume, that will be explained in the comic itself. Like, you know, why is Spider-Woman accepting superhero jobs again? She is currently doing superhero stuff in Marvel in a book called Strike Force, which is one of my favorite ongoings right now. But she was like thrust into that. It wasn't her choice, really. And the only reason she's staying there is because she's a hero, and she's not just going to abandon, the team and people in need and run from a fight just because, she resigned a couple years ago. She's a hero. She's accepting the call to action, but it wasn't her choice.
This is Jess that's desperate. She's always sort of been on her own, doing her own thing.
This is literally just wrong. The fact that Jess has always been on her own and now she's not. No, the status quo for Spider-Woman since like 2004 or whatever is that she's been on a team, that she's been an Avenger, she's been on a superhero team. And I kind of get where they're coming from, because originally, like, day zero for Spider-Woman, she didn't have control of her pheromone powers, which led to the village in Wundagore, near Wundagore Mountain, everyone there hating her because her pheromone powers went haywire, so everyone hated her, and she was kind of isolated because of that. But her entire character arc is that she learned to control her powers and overcame that adversity, and was stronger the other side because of it. This is Spider-Woman. Spider-Woman is a character who is slapped in the face with circumstance and comes out the other side stronger because she is a very strong character. This is just wrong. Like, even if you want to say that for a while she was a PI and not part of a team, like an official team anymore, that was a change. And it was a change to her character. The reason it was a big change to her character was because she was part of a team for so long. She faded into obscurity as a background character because she was just an Avenger for a long time. She's not Jessica Jones. She almost was, but she's not. Like, she's not an isolationist. That's just a complete raw misunderstanding of Spider-Woman.
Jess has always been very reasonable. She's not reasonable anymore.
What? What a boring change to make to a character.
One of the coolest things about Spider-Woman is that she can throw punches with your no-name grunts, or she can throw punches with Kang the Conqueror. Exactly who she's up against here, there's a bit of a mystery behind that.
You know what? I agree. I agree with that bit. Something cool about Spider-Woman is that she can go anywhere from being street level to being a, like, Avenger in space. That's cool. I like that about Spider-Woman. It's a cool idea. I guess that's 1 point for Team Marvel. Then they talk about the art for a bit, which I don't really have a huge issue with. It kind of looks like Greg Land art, which is not a good thing. Not in the faces, but just in the design. Like it's kind of colorful and bubbly, which is not my favorite for Spider-Woman. My ideal and, like, peak Spider-Woman art to me is Alex Maleev. Alex Maleev's art comes with a certain tone in mind, so if that's not the tone they're going for, cool. That's the tone I think Spider-Woman should have, a little more serious with, like, serious situation, and she's a serious character, but she jokes around and stuff, like, not to Spider-Man levels, but I don't know, just read Spider-Woman comics. Read Agent of S.W.O.R.D. That's a great one. And then they talk about the new suit, saying that it is going to reflect sort of the darker, grittier, I guess, missions that she's going on, which I guess if that's the case, if it is a darker, grittier thing, then Alex Maleev art would have worked. And that's why the costume is happening, so we sort of have like a hint of a story reason that there might not actually physically be a story reason for the change, but the narrative, like the meta-narrative reason, is because she's doing darker things now, which that can work. Like, Iron Man stealth suit, Spider-Man black suit, stuff like that. That usually informs like a darker tone going on. Or even just like, darker situation, like the Iron Man stealth suit specifically, you're gonna want like a darker suit if you're doing stealth stuff. But I don't know why they had to give her a completely new design for this, considering she already has a grayscale, darker version of her suit. Back in Time Runs Out, when like everyone had like a grayscale version of their costumes, she got one. Grab that, make the grays a little darker, and put some armor on it. And you got a cool new design that doesn't have webs.
We're just taking her in a completely new direction, but still trying to stay true to that character.
I fucking hate when people say this. When creatives say this shit, this immediately contradictory shit, like, oh, we're taking her in a new direction, but also we're not. Like, pick a fucking lane! Pick a lane! Bendis said this same shit back when he was gearing up to do his Guardians of the Galaxy run that completely changed Star-Lord's character from what he was in the comics to what he is in the movies. I think for better, but like he said this like wishy-washy, like, we're taking everything in a new direction, but I'm also staying faithful to the DNA run. I did an entire video on this a couple years ago.
This series gives you Jessica Drew doing what Jessica Drew does best, which is kick some butt.
No, that's not what Jessica Drew does best. I hate to break it to you, but if you ever read a Spider-Woman comic, that ain't the point. You know, there are characters where the point is just you want to watch shit explode and them get into cool fights. The Fast and the Furious movies, I don't know, like Captain America most of the time just punches shit. There are characters who just punch shit, and that's fine. Spider-Woman is not a fucking action character. She got layers, she an onion. The intrigue of Spider-Woman is not the physical acts that she's doing, it is the stuff that's going on up here, the shit that's, the gears that are turning up here after being such a tortured character for so long. That is why I like Spider-Woman, and that is why Spider-Woman works. Let's see how this character deals with the entire world thinking that she is a mass-murdering, world-conquering alien psychopath. Let's see how this character deals with wanting to do a complete redesign on her life after being in this comic book bullshit for so long. These are the things that make Spider-Woman interesting. She kicks people and makes things explode in the meantime, but that's not what I'm here for. That's not what I hope anyone is here for. The first thing that comes to mind when I think about Spider-Woman is the analysis of a character who goes through these things, who has been so steeped in continuity and has shit hurled at her for decades at this point, but comes out stronger the other side in, like, spitting in the face of it. Just like, hey, fuck all that. I don't care. I'm gonna get through it. I'm gonna be stronger because of it, and I'm gonna make some funnies along the way.
If you're one of those people who just can't wait for the big summer blockbuster extravaganza in your movie theater, this is that book in the Marvel Universe.
I'm not one of those people. I can't wait for Fast and the Furious Spider-Woman edition.
I feel like there's always been some destiny that was all leading to this, of me blowing up a lot of stuff with Jessica Drew.
Why does she keep talking about explosions? Like, it's not just me, right? She keeps talking about explosions like it's the whole point. I wouldn't say that's the whole point for most characters. Why is, like, the word explosion come up so often while pitching this book? Stop! The point is, about all this, I'm just, like, generally annoyed. I'm obviously not going to judge this book completely. Like, my opinions are not going to be cemented until I actually read the thing, because it's not out yet. It comes out soon. But it's not out yet, so clearly I'm not gonna sit here and say, don't buy this book. I was gonna be concerned regardless. Like, if they announced a Spider-Woman book with a master creative team, like if fucking Matt Fraction and Alex Maleev were on this book, but they were still saying these same things, I would be just as concerned. If, you know, they said, bar none, like nothing, and Spider-Woman got a book, I would still be concerned, because I'd be like, why? I am aware that this character sucks and no one likes her. I love the character. I'm aware that no one cares about this character. Not a lot of people do, so it's weird that she would be getting an ongoing. Time and time again, every time that a solicit comes out, or they release a trailer, or they release the new design, or this, and that, and the other, and every time, it's just something that makes me go, huh. Like, it turns me off of the book. And I'm gonna give it a shot. I will probably give it the first story arc. It's probably gonna be canceled after that anyway. You know, we'll see. At the end of the day, no one really knows if the book's gonna be good or not until it comes out and it's in our hands and we can read it. So I do recommend buying it, or at least just hearing what people have to say about it before you buy it. Just, maybe they're just selling it in a weird way and it actually is a lot of fun. Like, I could be wrong even. Like, maybe this new direction that they keep talking about is great. Maybe I do want to see Jessica Drew cause helicopter explosions. Maybe that's something I never knew I needed. It just seems to me, as a massive fan of Spider-Woman, that everything that these people are saying illustrates a massive misunderstanding of the character. And that makes me a little concerned and a little sad. I'm worried. And I have a right to be worried. Especially as a big fan of this character. Even if I wasn't. Like, this is weird. We're living in a weird world right now where Spider-Woman might be getting a movie, and Spider-Woman has a new ongoing out of literally nowhere. I hope it's good. I really do hope it's good, because I'm tired of having characters I love, like Iron Man, be treated poorly, like Dan Slott's Iron Man. Okay, bye. Watch more of my things, please.
Jess has always been very reasonable. She's not reasonable anymore.